Welcome to B2B No Bull.
That's right, no double speaker gibberish, no talking heads. This is a safe place to talk about what you as professionals in the space can do to look like heroes to your bosses, make sales very happy, bring success to the organization, and that bottom line. Let's get started.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of B2B No Bull. This is where we just kind of cut through all the fluff and all the jargon and just try to get to what marketers really need today to feel informed and feel like they're on top of their game. So I'm Liz Brohan, and unfortunately, my brother Mark cannot join us today, so I guess that's his loss. I'm going to make sure that I can still make fun of him, so I'll figure out a way to squeeze that in. But I'm super excited about our guest and the topic today. We are really going to dive in on brand development because this woman has been building her career, helping companies really leverage their brand. And that is so important today because I don't even think everybody knows how to define brand, right? So not only is she going to help you leverage it for growth, but she's also going to show you how to leverage it so that you can scale faster. And those are actually kind of two different things. So everyone, I do want you to welcome Sue Kirchner today. She is the founder of her own brand communications firm called Brand Strong Marketing. And also she is the host of her own podcast, which has been going strong for a long time. And that's called Turbo Brand Marketing. So welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I gave away a little bit about you, but maybe you could dive in and tell me more about you.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I am the founder of Brand Strong Marketing. I am a brand strategy advisor, and for over 25 years, I have used a particular methodology to help growing companies attract the right customers, enter new markets successfully, and take advantage of growth opportunities, all so that they can scale faster, easier, and more effectively. And I am a firm believer that the brand plays such an instrumental role at this point where companies are starting to scale, because it really does help them attract the customers they're going to need to grow, attract the employees they're going to need to serve those customers, and then even attract the capital that they're going to need to pay for all of that. And that's what gets them to have some forward momentum acceleration instead of being stuck.
I am on board with everything you just said. And one of the things I'll tell our audience is I just had the privilege and the honor of being on Sue's podcast. And I went through the story of how I had to rebrand my entire company at one point.
Yeah.
And we were hitting a lot of pain points, but it was so important to make sure that we were able to move forward and keep all the credibility that we had built up over, 25 plus years being in business.
Oh, absolutely. You were a great guest. We had such a fun conversation about just branding in general. And then, like you said, specifically about how you had to rebrand your company at a specific point, and there were some challenges associated with that.
Absolutely. So I'm a big believer in everything that you do, because I think people, like I said earlier, it's very difficult to define what brand is. Everybody has a different idea. Sometimes if you go up to the C-suite or just go up the food chain, they think it's the logo.
Right.
And then maybe a creative director thinks as well, it's our look, it's our font and our palette.
Right.
But really, so those things are important, but that's not really what it is.
Right. Absolutely. Yes. Let me tell you what it is so we can move it from there. But the brand, like I said, 20 years ago, I was battling a brand is just a logo. And it still shocks me that today you still run into people who view that. But it's not. The brand is actually, it is a perception that resides in the minds of a stakeholder who interacts with your organization. And they create this perception based on a culmination of the communications and the experience that they have received from your organization. So the big thing to know about that is that it's what they think your brand is, not what you think your brand is. So as founders, business owners, leadership teams, the best you can hope to do is manage that brand because you don't own it.
You don't
so
own it.
Everything you do, whether it's every communication, every marketing piece, every customer touch point in the experience, it all is a chance to make or break that brand promise, that perception in the minds of your audiences. And it's not just your customers.
No.
It's prospects, it's employees, it's future employees, it's referral partners and investors, like I mentioned.
I always like to think of it as the brand is what's in the head and the heart of the stakeholders that you are most interested in impacting.
Right.
And believe it or not, B2B marketers, heart really is involved. Emotional decision-making is a big part of this. So there's a lot of aspects of your brand that have to live up to kind of both sides of the rational and emotional thinking.
Absolutely. Because again, at both sides, whether it's, especially B2B and B2C or B to every consumer out there, it's an emotional connection. It's a feeling that you're trying to create. Because if you can put that perception in their heads, and then they like and feel that this brand is relevant and it actually provides them value, then it starts to build the emotional connection, trust, loyalty, the ability, they'll start talking about you and sharing advocates, what they love about you and things like that. So again, we all like to pretend that we're rational human beings, but we still, at the end of the day, buy off of emotions. And the brand is what creates that emotional connection that cements a customer's loyalty and obviously revenue and sales to your organization.
Yep. And I'm going to take a minute and just kind of get specific as to, some of the wonderful work you do at the small business and the mid-cap level. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be really great for our listeners who are, part of firms like that for sure. Why is brand so important when you're at that critical stage?
Yeah. When you're at the critical stage of scaling, number one, I mentioned this earlier, you're going to need three things. You're going to need more customers. So how are you talking about yourself and who are you talking to? That's one of the biggest things about scaling that keeps people stuck is they know they have growth opportunities, but they're not sure who their ideal customer is or where they should be spending their marketing dollars. But you're going to need more customers. Then you're going to need employees who service those customers, but not just any employees. You want the employees who are going to fit in with your culture and who are going to help deliver on that brand promise, right? So it's important that you're branding to employees as well. And then, like I said, you're going to need capital in order to pay for all of this. And if you can't tell someone why to invest in your company or a banker to give you a loan so that you can scale or buy more equipment to expand and things like that, if they don't believe in your vision and your promise and how strong your customer base is, you're not getting any money and you're not going anywhere. But the other thing about scaling is all about consistency and process now. And that's where the brand comes in, because when you're smaller and you're starting to grow, you as the founder or the executive team, you're probably still involved in everything, right? So you can control how the employees are delivering, how people are talking about your organization. You're probably still one of the main salespeople for the firm and things like that. As you start to scale, you start to bring on more people. And then those people don't touch the founder or the executive team anymore directly. So you're now relying on layers of communication or layers of management and employees watching leadership walk the talk of the brand to figure out what they're supposed to be delivering or how they're supposed to talk about the firm.
Right. So what you're really telling us is that internal branding is probably a foundational element.
Yeah.
Particularly when you are looking to grow.
Yes.
And so that you can scale. Because, right, as a leader or even a founder, you're going to have to take steps back, but you want the messaging to continue on without it coming out of your mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other things when you're scaling too. One is, you're obviously looking for that consistency, but you're also probably entering new markets where you've got a chance to make a great first impression. So you better make sure you have your story straight. But there's also the point where you may be looking at an exit. or you may be looking at, taking the brand of the founder, because that's usually when small companies start to scale and they realize all of a sudden that, wow, the brand resides with the owner or the founder or the CEO, and we need to make it part of the organization. Because if the owner ever wants to sell or step away, they have to be detached from the brand of the organization so that the customers don't flee when they sell it or take off. So,
yeah, absolutely. You don't want the owner to be the brand.
Yes.
Yeah, it needs to live and breathe within the entire organization and not reside with just one individual.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So you can do all the things that you just told us we were going to want to do.
Yes, exactly.
So tell us a little bit. Sounds like there's a lot of kind of cracks in the armor of brand development. Where do you think, you've mentioned a few of them already, but what are some of the other things that the brand can help solve for?
The brand, one of the things also that I think is a huge overlooked aspect of the brand is I call it the gift of clarity. So it's the gift of clarity to the founder, to the executive team, and even to the employees in that everybody understands what the brand is, who the customer base is, what their needs are, and how my role directly impacts that. But it also, as you're starting to scale and you have opportunities to grow, it's so easy to get distracted by shiny objects, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, oh, a customer who loves us said, would we do this for them? Hey, let's invest and do that. And then suddenly you're deviating down this road. Or you're like, hey, we can do all these things for all these people. And now no one knows exactly what you stand for, because you're a different thing to a different target segment, things like that. So having that clarity is almost like a guardrail. It's a North Star, or it's a guardrail that makes it so much easier to make strategic decisions in terms of where do we go, what markets are we entering, who are we hiring, what equipment are we investing in, or what new service are we rolling out. So that clarity is absolutely important. But other cracks that come through are, as you start bringing on more people, if you don't tell these new people what the brand is and how they're expected to deliver on that promise, well, you start to see culture erosion. And then when the culture erodes, you start to see people leave who were key essential talent within your organization. They're like, this isn't the same company that it was before. I don't want to work here anymore. So you see cracks there, or you see cracks in consistency in delivering your product or your service. So it may be that customer A had an experience that's completely different than customer B. And so now there's confusion in the market when they both talk about you. Or you may find that customer A started to work with you and they loved it. But then when they repurchased or re-upped with whatever service you have, and suddenly, well, that wasn't what it was the first time.
You see a lot of those sorts of things happen when a company starts to experience some very fast growth.
Yes.
Sometimes you're just not prepared for the amount of growth.
Yeah.
And then, those kinds of incidences tend to, just permeate the rest of the company.
Absolutely.
So I know you have great stories to tell that'll help our listener, take theory and see how it's been applied.
Yeah.
So I think you had a story about an IT company that was growing way too fast.
Yes.
Can you tell us about those guys?
Yes, absolutely. So as you mentioned, it was an IT managed service provider company. And they suddenly started, seeing, sales take off. They were growing. They were all excited. They were bringing people on quickly because they wanted to handle any opportunity that came in the door. They wanted to not say no and take it. So they were onboarding people left and right. And then all of a sudden, the CEO started to realize that, wait a minute, we're not actually making money anymore. We're not profitable.
Ouch.
We're selling, but we're not profitable. And we have all these salespeople. And he started looking at that and he's like, I think we have a sales problem. But when we started to dig into it, and when I met with him, it was like, well, you have more than a sales problem. Your salespeople have never been onboarded and told what to sell.
Oh, no.
Or how to sell it. So they were selling anything just to get their numbers. And suddenly you've got this chaos within the organization where they're out selling services you didn't even want to sell, or that you had decided were not that profitable.
You're not going to be able to, live up to those promises.
Right. Or even the techs inside the company are saying, we don't know how to do that. You went and sold something that we didn't even know how to do, right? So they were having this big problem. And then because of that, then the culture started eroding and top
man.
talent started walking out the door. But what really got the CEO to say, okay, we have a huge problem, as if those weren't enough, was when he went to go get more money from an investor to help fund the growth and what he was doing. And the investor said, well, tell me how you're special. Tell me how you're different. And he's like, I couldn't tell him. I couldn't tell him anymore. I had no idea what we stood for anymore. And if I don't know,
then nobody knows.
No one knows. And how would the customer ever know, right?
Oh my gosh, this is brutal.
Absolutely brutal.
Was there a fix?
Yeah, absolutely was a fix. So I came in and worked with, the leadership team. And one of the first things we did was to say, let's go talk to your customers and your employees. Let's do some research. Let's go figure out from the ones who are still profitable and valuable and have been with you for a long time, let's go figure out why. And why do they think you're special? So we did research and we came back, we drilled down on, yes, you still have a brand. You still are known for something, valuable to a certain particular audience, but we absolutely articulated, here's what we're good at and what we do. Here's our ideal target market because these people are still loyal and what we're selling to them is profitable. And then let's share that with our employees so that the salespeople now know what to sell to whom, how to talk about the company, and suddenly we've got more profitable growth coming in the door.
And I hope in all of that you were able to help them really articulate differentiation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I have seen that be a major problem, as you just mentioned, for almost every firm we ever worked with.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a lot of IT managed service providers out there. So why is yours different? Why is yours special? Who is the right fit that's going to love your people or love your service and things like that? But I do have to give credit to the CEO. He absolutely embraced the idea that he was the steward of the brand and needed to walk the talk. So what I love was we printed up these cards for him that had the core values on one side and they had the brand promise on the other. And no matter what meeting he had with the executive team, he would throw that card on the table. And then at the end, when whatever strategic decision they came up with in that meeting, he would say, are we adhering to our core values? And then flip it. And is it strengthening our brand? And if it's not, why are we doing this?
Well, that's a pretty solid exercise.
Yep.
Good
absolutely.
for him.
Yeah.
That is great.
Yep. So, and the company did well. They actually, a number of years later, were acquired for being such a great, strong company with strong customer loyalty. And so it all ended up well.
And I got to be honest, it sounded more like a business turnaround situation and not just brand help. So all of that kind of goes hand in hand with the brand work, correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. Because the brand is your business strategy, your business plan come to life, right? It's the promises you're making, why you set up the business the way you did, why you do what you do and things like that. So, that's another one of we were talking about myths earlier about, what people understand or don't understand about the brand is that branding and brand strategy, it doesn't play in the marketing department. It plays in the C-suite because it touches everything. If you're including the experience that your customers have with your organization, not just the messaging, well, then it's operations, it's accounting, it's HR, it's, logistics.
It's everything but.
Everything. And the brand plays a role in determining how you go about bringing your product or your service to market. And so it has to be adhered to and understood by everybody in the organization.
So for some of our listeners who probably want to know, how do I get the attention of the C-suite? Because you're absolutely right. They know that all of this needs to be top down.
Right.
So where do they start?
Yeah. So, it's tricky. Internally, yes, you would, a lot of times maybe the marketing department, brings it up to the C-suite level and says, hey, we've got an issue here. But a lot of times it's the CEO or the sales, VP saying, we've got a problem.
Oh, I think that's a very wise observation.
Yeah, it's usually when the VP of sales comes in and says, we're not closing deals anymore, or we're not selling profitable items anymore, or there seems to be a perception out there that we do this and we don't. What's going on?
Yeah.
That's when it gets elevated.
I'll tell you, I always had kind of a perspective. I absolutely believed that when marketing enlisted the help of sales, things would go better no matter what.
Oh, absolutely.
But also the other thing that I would try to coach was that try to make it the C-suite's idea.
Yeah.
You know, if you go in there and say, I think I have something that's going to help us sell products better and faster.
Yeah.
Those were the kinds of things that then they took ownership of and eventually just, you know, took them on as their own concepts.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing too is the brand work should not only, or really shouldn't be done when in a turnaround situation, right? Because branding and brand strategy, it's a long game, right?
Yeah.
It's all about building relationships and
it's a constant.
And trust, and it's a constant. So really, brand, what I have found is with my clients is the founders and the CEOs realize or invest in branding when they have more growth opportunities in front of them, and they want to make sure they get a better return on their investment for this growth, or they're going to make a great first impression for something new that they're doing, right?
Yes.
So whether they're entering a new market, whether you're upscaling your customers, or maybe you're going into a new geographical area, or you're rolling out a new product or service, that is the perfect time to take a breath and say, what is our brand? Let's figure this out before we spend a ton of money trying to enter this market, right?
And I know a lot of our listeners, they're always in a situation where they're in the middle of a product launch, and a product launch would be the perfect time to be able to, you know, take a few of these brand processes and put them at the front of the process of the launch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's one of them. Another key trigger point for branding or growth strategy is mergers and acquisitions. So within this small and mid-size range, a lot of growth comes from acquiring your competitors or acquiring an adjacent company that has, you know, adjacent services and things like that. Well, the ROI on those is usually terrible because what they don't consider is the people side of the merger and acquisition, right? And you can always use the brand, and you should use the brand to talk about, okay, how are we now bigger, better? More importantly, how does this impact the people that we care about, which are the customers and the employees? So if you're acquiring your competitor, it's because you really wanted access to their customer list.
And their people.
And yet they spend so much time on the IT and the operations and the financial side of the acquisition that suddenly they look up and they're shocked that the customers left and the employees left.
Yeah.
Because no one bothered to talk to them about what it meant for them and what was going to happen after this big event.
Absolutely. So job one is let's make sure that anyone who's coming on board under this acquisition is embraced.
Yeah.
And taught what the brand is, but then also taught what our culture is.
Yeah.
You know, so that they understand that they're going to be valued.
Yep.
And you want them to stay.
Yeah.
Because as you pointed out earlier, hiring and retention are a huge way to leverage the brand.
Absolutely.
To help you with both of those. And I know you've got another cool story to tell us about that.
Yeah. So, and I'll get into that. The third reason that people, seem to invest in branding and figuring out their brand strategy is for exactly what you just talked about. It's getting talent, hiring new talent. They need an employer brand, right? And especially in that small to mid-size range, some of my customers that, they're $1 million in size, they have so many growth opportunities ahead of them, and yet they can't hire anybody because no one's heard of them. Right. No one's heard of this small business. If I have to choose between a company I've heard of and a company I've never heard of, where would you go work, right, as an employee? So I'll share the example now, is that I worked with an insurance company. And it was an established company, had been around for a number of years, but a new CEO bought it, took it over, and he was young, dynamic, had all these awesome growth ideas. And he actually improved growth year over year, having taken over the firm. But then all of a sudden I met him and he was frustrated because they were stuck. They stopped growing. And I was like, well, do you need a new, are we talking about customers? Do you need a new customer base? He's like, no. He goes, I could grow. I could bring in more customers if I had the people to serve them. And I don't. So he was stuck because he couldn't hire talent. No one knew the name of the company. No one knew what they stood for. They didn't even say on their website that they were hiring. And they had no story about why should I come work for you, right? So I did my entire brand process and methodology, but from an internal focus, which I have to do for a lot of small companies, is to say, why should someone come and work for you? And then who is the right employee who needs to be attracted here, who's going to help deliver on that brand promise? So worked with the insurance company. We came up with the core values, the vision, the mission, because they didn't have that done yet. Worked on the brand promise for employees, interviewed all the employees to understand who fits here, why do you like the company, what do you deliver, and things like that. Creating a profile for who would thrive in this culture and this environment.
Perfect. Right.
And it ended up being so successful. And within 6 months, he hired 2 new people and was able to get the company unstuck and growing again.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that story. And it's interesting where you started that they lacked awareness in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And you're right. People want to work with someone they've heard of, and who has kind of that success halo. Yeah. Right? Yep. And then you have to have all of the other things in place that you talked about so that you can immediately articulate, this is why you want to come work here.
Right. And especially now with millennials and especially Gen Z, they want to work for a company that they feel has purpose, right? They want to know that if they're going to come and work here, that we're somehow or other, we're changing the world. Not necessarily changing the world, but that there is something exciting and purposeful that their work is going to be. Yes. Making a contribution. In a meaningful way. And they want to know what their role is in doing that. And if you can't articulate that as the company looking to employ these people, they're going to choose someplace else. Because they really they think about work a little differently, and they want it to be a reflection of their selves. So they want to work for a company that has the same values and where they're able to shine.
So the point here is that as you're shaping core values, as you're shaping mission vision, mm-hmm. you still need to be flexible because mm-hmm. the market's going to change. Yeah. And the market now is wondering, okay, how are you a good citizen of the world? Right. And so that's something else that needs to be kind of woven into the brand, starting probably with the mission vision.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Put it on your website. Put it on your social media channels. Put it on the wall. Exactly. This is who we are. This is what we're trying to accomplish in the world. So, and that's what I love about the brand promise is it really gets back to your why, right? Why do you do what your organization does? And if you can articulate what that why is, you'll cover that. You'll cover why, a Gen Z employee would want to come work for you because they'll get excited by that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that often gets overlooked in this entire process is HR's role mm-hmm. in understanding the brand and being able to connect that because they're probably going to be the first face of the company. Right. So let's not leave them out.
Yeah, no, HR needs to understand it so they help recruit the right people who will, fit in with the culture and deliver on the brand. But they need to know about too, because it should be part of the onboarding process. The onboarding is the perfect time when you have this new employee's attention, where you should be sharing what the brand is and how it shows up here at our company and what your role is in delivering it.
Exactly. Give us a few more examples of that. We talked about the necessity of marketing kind mm-hmm. of partnering with sales. Now, how can marketing partner with HR?
Yeah, marketing can partner with HR, like we said, helping come up with helping with research around who is the ideal employee that will fit in here. And then coming up with stories. Everything is about stories now. So marketing can help HR with share a story of an employee's career progression here at this organization.
That's huge.
Share a story of what the culture looks like when it really works, well, or who fits in here, or share a story of how people get promoted here, or share a story of how we handle celebrations here at this organization. So marketing can work with HR to help put those stories together that then they can use when they're out recruiting or onboarding, and bringing more people on successfully.
Relying on marketing to help you communicate how an individual will be successful at our company is a huge help, because that's what people want to know. What's going to make me a success here?
Right. Right.
And if you can tell it in a story, that's even better.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think that's a great point for our listeners.
Yeah.
It's super cool. Let's also talk about your third story.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because this one sounds like a kind of a fun mess. I got to be honest.
Yes.
It involved private equity.
Yes.
Are a few of you going through a few private equity things these days? It seems like everybody is.
Everyone's going through private equity. Yeah, so many private equity firms, and then so many companies, getting acquired or at least being courted by private equity. So, so this was an example. It was, as you said, it was a mess, but it was a super fun engagement to work on from a brand point of view. It was a brand new private equity firm who saw an opportunity to do some roll-ups in the automotive accessory market. The private equity firm came together and they said, you know what, we have a name and we've started acquiring some firms, but we're having a hard time branding ourselves as a private equity firm to investors or to potential acquisition targets. So how do we come up with our brand as a private equity? Why should you sell your company to us?
Another layer of ask, right?
Another layer of ask. So we came up with, the brand standards. I mean, the whole thing about how do you talk about yourself and what is your why as this private equity firm?
Right.
How are you different than any other investment opportunities out there? And we were able to come up with that messaging and the brand for the private equity firm. But then what we also were able to work on, which was equally as fun, was they had already started acquiring and putting together some deals. They had bought 7 mom and pop small auto accessory manufacturers. And these were the kinds of companies, some of them made like products to help you tune your cars that like the,
Sure.
Fast and the Furious, young people absolutely love that stuff, all the way to vent shades that go on your windows so someone could smoke while they're in the car. So there was a wide variety. They had 7 of these firms. And so private equity is all about scaling and, cost effectiveness and, cutting costs and things like that. So we were asked to come in and look at the 7 companies and the 7 brands and figure out which brands were valuable, which ones actually had consumer equity. People recognized the brand and it actually had a positive attribute to it. And which brands, nobody really knew about them. They were just had to be the product that was on the shelf kind of a thing. So we worked to identify there were 2 brands worth keeping and bringing everything to market. So then we killed off and come up with a strategy for how to merge the other products or roll them underneath those 2 brands, or some were just renamed and rebranded. But at the end of the day, it was exciting because we were able to have 2 brands with really clear ideas on who is the ideal target market. We created posters of the ideal target market and hung them up around the manufacturing organizations to say, hey, remember, this is who you're building a product for. This is who you're selling to. They're the ones who are using your product. Remember that as you're designing and innovating and things like that. But it was incredibly a fascinating project to basically create a brand architecture that made a lot more sense and was more cost effective for the private equity firm.
And again, brand is going a long way towards actually building a stronger business.
Yes.
Not just kind of a name in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So you're looking at costs that are duplicate, when you're acquiring all of these firms. You're looking at confusion in the marketplace, but you're also working with these former owners, who now are just, having to figure out, how do I get absorbed?
Yes.
And feel like I'm still, providing value and important.
Value. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, and the brand is definitely how you communicate all of that. And, here again, private equity firm, here's the brand, here's why we're rolling your product into this brand. It's because ultimately at the end of the day, this brand is well known in the marketplace and we can charge a premium for it, which means everyone is more successful. And, we can hire more, we can innovate more, we can make more money.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's really solving for several different issues, including kind of a positioning in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That will eventually make you more successful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just kind of unpack a little bit because, you've got so much experience. You've been doing this for over 25 years. You developed all of these skills from the beginning of your career.
Sure. Absolutely. So, yeah, I have kind of a little bit of a different mindset for various reasons in my background. I've been asked on other podcasts, how do you tell your story about how you got interested in branding? I'm like, okay, well, there was like 3 key pivotal moments or whatever. So, the first one was when I was working at Motorola out of college, and I worked in the cell phone division, and it was
Very cool.
It was awesome. But I grew up in Latin America, so I spoke Spanish. And so when I was part of the cell phone group, I got to do everything marketing right out of school, So
Nice.
I got to do trade shows. Because I could do it for the Latin American market for Motorola because I was the only one who spoke Spanish. So I get to see the whole gamut of marketing, communications, activity, and distribution, strategies and things like that. And I just absolutely fell in love with, Latin America and marketing and storytelling.
Right, now you've got a global perspective.
And I have a global perspective. And then, I was getting my MBA at Kellogg at the time, and there was an entrepreneurial class. And I had just found out that Motorola was moving our whole division to Florida, and I didn't want to move. So I'm like, I'm going to start my own business. Latin America was hot at the time. I've got all this marketing experience that I'm going to build a company. And it was at Kellogg, and I was in an entrepreneurial class, and we had the opportunity to pitch your business to investors.
I love it. Shark Tank.
Exactly.
Kellogg style.
Exactly. So I'm like, this is going to be so cool. And I came up with this whole idea for coming up with an agency that would handle Latin American marketing and things like that. And I came in and I presented to the investors, and, they all stood up and said, no, we're not investing. And I was like, absolutely shocked and
kidding.
Cried the whole way home. This was what I was going to do after I left the company and, all this kind of stuff. But what it was the first epiphany I had that I saw the story and I didn't communicate it well. So obviously I didn't understand where they were coming from. I was so excited about my own idea that's what I just communicated and shared is this is what I'm going to do. And it's so cool. And I hoped my enthusiasm would sway them. But I didn't stop to say, well, what do investors want?
Exactly.
They want to make money. And they didn't see in my story how they were going to make money. So I learned right then and there, okay, put yourself in their shoes, right? The other thing was when I lived overseas, you tend to have a different mindset about culture and differences, and there's different ways of looking at things. And I am eternally grateful for the fact that I was able to live overseas and go to school and work for a company, and because I see things differently than other people do. And that kind of also helps me recognize patterns in branding and understanding cultural differences in target markets and things like that. So, and then the last kind of, what drove me into where I'm at with the branding and everything too is at a certain point, I wanted to see if I could build a brand. I had been traveling to Latin America. I had my first child.
You were not going to give up on that Shark Tank moment.
I was not giving up on the Shark Tank moment. But I don't want to travel to Latin America anymore when I have kids and things like that. So I was going to see if I could put my money where my mouth is and build a brand. So at the time that I tried to do this, e-commerce was the hot thing. Anybody can open a store, right? So I did. But I was so in love. Again, we all make mistakes as we grow as business owners and stuff, but I wanted to see if I could build a brand that had a deep emotional connection. That's what I wanted to see if I could do, put my money where my mouth is and see if I could do that. So I created an e-commerce store called the Chocolate Cake Club.
Okay, now that sounds like a winner to me.
Sounds like a winner. And it actually, you either loved it once I explained it or you got really mad,
okay,
right?
Explain it.
It's funny. So what I was trying to do was evoke, I never sold chocolate cake. What I sold was the feeling that you have when you're eating chocolate cake and you're at a celebration and you're surrounded by family, you're surrounded by friends, and you just have this general warm, exciting, loved feeling eating chocolate cake. So it was the club around that feeling. So and my target was busy working moms. And I sold all kinds of products that would allow you to have more fun with your family. So whether it was like kids cooking kits or unique games, stuff you wouldn't find in Target, it was all, different, unique, independent kind of manufacturers and things like that. The busy mom who I was trying to attract, they loved that brand name. They're like, oh, I get it. I get what you mean when you say eating chocolate cake. I immediately know what you're talking about, how I feel kind of thing, right? Men, on the other hand, who I told about myself, hated it. What do you mean you don't sell chocolate cake? You're trying to, this is like a switch and bait.
Your brand is a disconnect.
Exactly. It's a switch and bait kind of a thing, So it was funny to me that, I was like, okay, but I loved that my brand resonated with the target market I was trying to go after. So that was fun. But yeah, I learned a ton from having the e-commerce store.
No kidding.
Learned a ton. I learned all about understanding your target market.
Very cool.
I learned all about paying attention to the market when it shifts. Because the busy working mom was initially my target market, but this was around 2008, 2009 when the recession hit. And suddenly I was still selling product, but I was no longer selling to the busy working mom. I was selling now to the grandparents because they were the only ones who could afford to buy this stuff and then gift it to their grandkids.
How did you figure that out?
It took me over a year and a half to suddenly wake up and say, wait, all of my marketing messaging is wrong. I keep talking about saving time and having fun with your kids and, that I'm doing the work and I'm doing the work to find you great products for your children and all this good stuff. And instead I should have been targeting grandma, like you're going to look like a hero for buying this really cool stuff. Or you can have fun with your grandchild cooking together or playing games or, the messaging. I should have recognized that faster. And so that was another lesson learned.
It was a traumatic time for all of us.
Oh, it was a traumatic time for everybody. But yes, so that was something I learned. But I also learned how if you build it, it does not mean they will come.
No.
Right?
That's
so
true.
I had to learn all about how do you drive traffic to your website, which is definitely something I've taken forward for my clients and things like that. And then the last thing is just, how do you tell stories that help build that emotional connection? How do you, learn how to really embrace that feeling of eating chocolate cake? What does it mean? How do you translate it to the different customers, first busy moms and then grandparents? And then, get people to your store and willing to buy and trust, because I was a small independent
and you
e-commerce.
were an early adopter.
I was an early adopter. Eventually, everybody got crushed by Amazon, which was, again, life lesson and business lesson. But it was wonderful. I like to say I was one of the first people online to sell Elf on the Shelf, which has now become this huge phenomenon. But
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Claim to fame
Claim
there.
to fame, exactly.
So all of this learning, kind of, done at the School of Hard Knocks, now translates into you being a mentor and kind of a teacher. You work a lot with students.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I love teaching. I taught international marketing at Lake Forest Graduate School for a while. And I would take students down to Latin America for a 2-week immersion class. And I just love the joy of teaching and sharing what I know. So I've always tried to bring on interns for my company because I end up teaching. I end up giving just as much as I get in those internship experiences. But one of the ways that I definitely give back now is the high school that my kids went to. They have a business incubator program, another Shark Tank kind of a thing. And so I come in and serve as a subject matter expert, talk about marketing and pricing strategies and things like that. But then I also sit on the board who judges the student teams to decide who moves on to district and who's going to get some actual. They actually write checks and fund these students' ideas. It's an amazing program. It's Palatine High School, District 211, and I'm excited to be on the board for that.
No, that does sound like a lot of fun and very worthy.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
So, one of the things that we like to do here at No Bull is, obviously just kind of cut through it all.
Yep.
So that's what we're going to do now. All right? Here's what I'd love to know, right? I'm going to pretend like I'm going to launch a new brand, right?
Okay.
So what do I need to do to get my brand in order? Are there steps I need to take? Where do I start?
Yes. So the brand you need to get, there's definitely distinctive steps to it. The first is you need to understand who are you, right? And by what I mean by who are you is what's your mission? What's your vision? What's your core values? What's your culture like? What's the DNA? What's your why? Why do you do this and not something else as an organization kind of a thing? So you get all of that together of like, who are you? What's your personality? What's your tone? When you communicate, are you casual? Are you funny? Are you super serious? Things like that. So getting that identity together. Then the next step is who's your target market? And you need to understand them almost better than they understand themselves.
I almost feel like starting there is a good idea too.
You can absolutely start there. But you really want to know who is going to love your story of who you are, who's going to pay for it, who's going to be profitable for you to go after. So understanding your target market, the needs, their wants, their aspirations, it's beyond demographics. It's what was the pain point that they actually called you, and start collecting data around that. When they talk about you, what do they say? And use their language. Listen. I love the research part of it, and I love doing the qualitative interviews because I love hearing what they say. They use language that usually my client does not. And so then we have to switch messaging to reflect the way that people talk about them. So that's understanding, the next step is understanding your target market. Then the third is what's your unique value proposition? So what your service or your product, why is it better? Maybe not even better. Why is it different than anything that's out there? And I said that because being better is hard, being different is easy, right? So how are you different and positioned differently than any of your competitors or competitive options that are out there? What is the promise you're making that if they work with you, they should expect this? So you've got to nail that down. And then the last part is then now, okay, well, what's the strategy of how you're going to get that out there?
Exactly.
What are the channels that you should be using to get your brand story out in front of the right people?
So I know I started this question by, imagining I was starting a brand, but I got to be honest, the advice you're giving us and the process you're walking us through, that's for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
It doesn't matter what organization you're in.
Yeah.
Those are hallmarks.
They are hallmarks. And I like to say your why, people talk about, you can completely change your brand and rebrand. And it's like, no, you have to consider your why or the promise or the DNA of why you started this organization. That never changes. How you implement it, that does change over time. And like I mentioned, changing your target market may change. What product or service you offer may change. How you talk about it, which features you promote versus others. All of that can change, but your why usually does not change. It's why you got into business. It's why you're passionate about doing what you do. And I think that's the thing that touches me the most, or that I absolutely love the most about when I work with my clients and I come back and I do this brand identification process for them, is I have seen founders tear up. And a few have told me that you made me fall in love with my business again.
Oh, that's pretty incredible.
It is.
I think one of the big takeaways that I'm getting from this conversation is that when you ignore your brand, lots of things can go wrong.
Yes.
And it's going to impact almost every asset or aspect, I should say, of your business.
Oh, absolutely.
So what do you think the other big takeaways are today, Sue?
I think the big takeaways are is no matter where you're at, stop and ask some questions of yourself. Do we really clearly understand what our brand is? And maybe you do, but do you really clearly understand your why, how you're different, your positioning, who your target market is, and all that? So have that foundation basically nailed down before you spend money on marketing. Because we all know business leaders who are like, oh my gosh, what's the saying? 50% of my marketing is working and I don't know which 50%. Or I worked with this agency and I got burned. It was a complete waste of money. Well, it's probably because you didn't do the foundational work up front to give these agencies what they needed to be effective, right? You know your business better than they ever will. So give them what they need. So the first is get that foundation down.
Absolutely.
Down pat. The second is keep talking to your customers. Voice of customer research is so important because that's where you'll find where maybe your target market shifted, or maybe what they value is a little bit different, or they don't understand everything that you do for them, or they may be sending you referrals, but they're the wrong referrals because when you ask them to describe you, they're not describing it correctly, and things like that. So always keep your pulse and talking to your customers.
And I think the biggest thing that we have going for us today is that there are so many places within our organizations to get that kind of information. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, primary research is great, but you've also got customer service. Yeah. And they're collecting data on the behaviors. So then you can link something that you're hearing maybe qualitatively to actual behaviors, and then there's also sales. Yeah. Sales is another great resource. Go on a sales call and just sit there and see how the interaction goes and what the customer is saying.
Right.
So,
yeah. And everything now is your brand is about building trust. And it's about being authentic, in today's age of AI and fake news.
We might all hate that word.
We hate the word and all this
but we
stuff.
get it.
But you really do need to be real. If you're going to create a relationship with someone, then they need to get to know you just as much as you're needing to get to know them. And so have the conversations. So that's definitely a key point. And then I would say the third takeaway from today is do not forget to brand internally. So share that, communicate what the brand is, what everyone's role is in delivering the brand, how you want to be talked about, because every person in your building is a brand ambassador. And they could be out just talking to their neighbors about the company and they describe it all wrong because they see it through their lens, right? Not the lens that you told them is how you want the company to be described or talked about.
Exactly right. Well, I got to say, this has been such a great conversation. We've got great takeaways, but I'm sure everyone listening right now wants to know, I think I might want to get in touch with this person. Sue, how do people contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Sue Kirchner is my profile. Brandstrongmarketing.com is my website.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember. You can find my podcast even on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. It's the Turbo Branding Show. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anyone. Give me a call. I'm happy to talk 30 minutes on the phone and just see what's challenging you? And is it
she's a
something
mentor, she's a teacher, and she can help you change your business and grow faster.
Yes.
So do reach out to her, everybody. I'm so happy we had you on the show today. This has been such an interesting session.
Thank you.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And, like I said, this is another outlet for me to teach people about branding, but you're a fabulous host, and you were a great guest on my show as well. So I'm excited for people to hear both conversations.
Absolutely. I hope everybody will tune into both of those. And I hope, of course, what you'll do next is share this episode with a friend, because you can never talk about brand enough. Honestly. It's just something that you always have to. It has to be foremost in every marketer's mind every day. So I hope you'll share this episode. And of course, I hope you will tune in again. So thank you very much for joining us today. And thanks to Sue. This was fun.
Thanks, Liz.